The fundamental idea of astrocartography is based on planet angularity to the 4 angles. As you know, the ascendant over here, which is your role and how you show up in the world, and also how the rest of the world sees you. It's kind of like your default operating system in the background. Then the descendant, which is over here, which is others that you bring into your life that very often teach you aspects of yourself that you don't really realize you need to learn. It's kind of like your shadow self. Up here, then we have the midheaven, which is the highest point of aspiration in your chart. It's very much the legacy you want to leave to the world. It's very much your true calling, particularly the 10th house, planets in the 10th house and planets ruling the 10th house. Then down on the bottom here, we have your IC, which is Latin for Imum Coli, which means your home and roots. It's not where you live now. It's kind of like your generational lineage, your family of origin going back generations. Now, I use Solar Fire and software. It's the finest software astrologically in the world, because a lot of the free software only covers aspects to the ascendant and the midheaven, and doesn't cover aspects to the descendant or the IC. So any of you that look at the IC, I mean, when I see planets on the IC, I know exactly what's happening in somebody's life, or exactly what their childhood was like, or exactly what their upbringing was like. So, you know, particularly for astrocartography, if people are looking to relocate to a place where they want to feel at home, it's really important to look at angles to the IC, which most of the free software doesn't do. There's one particular software that talks about that there's actually 40 aspects to the angles. There's not, there's over 4,000, because you're multiplying the 12 houses, you're multiplying, you know, 25 different aspects, because in astrocartography you use the minor planetary lines quite extensively. And then you're using the 12 planets, and then you're using the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, and the IC. So that's where you get the combination of over 4,000, not 40, which is a huge difference. So basically, astrocartography, it references all the elements of a birth chart to where a person currently lives. So this map here now is my map of Italy, for example. So the zodiac chart, which is like, you know, your circular chart, your natal birth chart, the natal chart is divinatory. The astro map is what we call in mundo, so it's physical. So basically what we're doing in astrocartography, we're mapping a circle onto a rectangle. So the rectangular lines on the map are, you know, they're accurate to within 2 or 3 miles, whereas, you know, the planetary houses in your astrological relocated chart, you know, vary slightly compared to the actual map. So this is one of the just an idea of an astrocartography map. I'm going to be bringing up detailed maps now shortly. So basically, the ecliptic maps the apparent path of the sun as seen from the Earth. And our natal chart it's kind of like our spiritual CV. I always like to describe our natal birth chart as like, it's, you know, it's your astrological DNA. It's what your soul came in this lifetime to learn and experience. So a relocated chart is where the spiritual part of your astrological chart plays out in new houses. And any planets within 3 degrees of an angle has a strong influence. So any, you know, because basically, as I said, astrocartography is all about angularity. It's all about the aspects of the planets to the angles, to the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, or the IC. So in astrocartography, we're reinterpreting the angles. So the relocated ascendant is a new way, for example, of being seen in the world. A relocated descendant is a new way of communicating with others. A relocated midheaven indicates your new purpose. A relocated IC gives your new sense of home. Now, the planetary lines in astrocartography have a radius of between 17 and 130 miles. So the fundamental idea of astrocartography is based on, as I said, planet angularity to the 4 angles. So you've got the ascendant here, which, as I said, it's your role in life. It's how you show up in the world and how you're seen. It's like your default operating system. Your descendant over here is like others that you bring into your life, very often that kind of represent your shadow self, that teach you things about yourself you're not necessarily aware that you need to know. Your midheaven then is the highest point of aspiration in your chart. It's your highest calling. It's the legacy you want to leave to the world. The IC down here is Latin for imum coli. It represents home and roots and family of origin, but also your generation lineage going back generations. So particularly for astrocartography, the IC is hugely important because if somebody relocates, very often they want to feel at home in the new location. So you would always look at, the planetary aspects to the IC and what planets are hitting the IC and how they're hitting the IC. So basically, what we're doing in astrocartography, we're mapping the circular natal birth chart, which is the zodiac chart, which is the natal chart, and it's divinatory. And the astro map then is an in mundo chart. It's a physical chart. So this is my astrocartography map of Italy. So basically what we're doing is we're mapping a circle onto a rectangle. And then the ecliptic maps the apparent path of the sun as seen from the Earth. Our natal chart, as I said, it's like our spiritual CV. It's like, what we came into this lifetime to learn and experience, and what we came to give to the world, but also what we came in to learn. So a relocated chart is where the spirituality plays out in new houses. And any planets within 3 degrees of any of the angles, like the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, or the IC, would have a hugely strong influence, particularly if any of the planets are sitting on the angles. So your relocated ascendant, it's your new way of being seen in the world. It's the new way of shining in the world, the new way of showing up. It's the new way of people seeing you. The relocated descendant is a new way of communicating with others. The relocated midheaven is your new purpose, your new legacy, your new higher calling, your new higher purpose. And the relocated IC would be your new sense of home, which is why planets on the IC or planets aspecting the IC are so important. The lines then have a radius sphere of influence of between 17 and 130 miles. So, in astrocartography, we don't just look at conjunctions and squares and trines and oppositions. We look at minor aspects like septiles, which have a radius of 34 miles, which indicates seeking conscious choice and higher creativity. We look at quintiles, which are all about externally manifesting creativity. We would look at biseptiles, which have a radius of 17 miles, and triundeciles, which would indicate like charged insight, for example. So I'm going to click exit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to the solar fire. Just give me one sec. So I'm going to show you the chart of Emily Dickinson and then her astrocartography for where she lived. And then I'm going to be doing David Bowie, and I'm going to be doing James Joyce and Tennessee Williams, and then I'll be looking at my chart. So here's Emily Dickinson's chart. She was born in Amherst, Massachusetts. As you can see, she's Scorpio rising. She's Sun, Venus, and Sagittarius in the first house. She's Mercury, Ceres in the second house. She's also, interestingly enough, Jupiter, Neptune. Like, what I have found is a lot of massively creative writers are Jupiter, Neptune. They're closely conjunct in Capricorn. There are 20 degrees and 21 degrees. So she's got a very packed second house. So we tend to think, excuse me, that our second house is just about our finances, but it's also very much about our movable talents and skills. It's about talents and skills that we have that we can, move wherever we move. Now, as we know, she didn't move, like she lived in the same place her whole life. But she's got, she's Virgo on her midheaven. So Virgo, as you probably all know, was ruled by Mercury. And she's got Saturn on her midheaven as well. So Saturn is like flavoring her Mercury, the Mercury aspect of her Virgo, because Mercury in Virgo is very precise. It's very analytic. It's very structured. And I mean, of all the poets I know, her poetry is probably the most finely paired of anybody, which is completely Saturn on the midheaven conjunct Virgo. So when we look at her astrocartography, this is her map. So Amherst is just here. It's just slightly over from Framingham. So this is the planetary lines that she has going through there. So what's interesting is you can see, where are we now? You can see that she's got Jupiter trining her descendant. You know, so she's within 7 miles of that. And as I said, like these planetary lines have radiuses of between anything from 17 miles to 137 miles. So Jupiter, as you probably all know, is expansion and abundance and higher wisdom. It's also travel, publishing and marketing. Now we know she didn't travel much, but certainly she published, you know, she was very widely published after her death.